just going to start that.
Excellent. Okay. We will start our meeting at 7:06 with the approval of the minutes from May 8th. I apologize. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. And we'll start with the approval of the minutes from May 18th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
And Katie seconded. Okay, all of those in favor of approving the meeting minutes from May 18th? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Or any abstentions? Okay, that's a unanimous approval. And now what we are desperately in need of, our next line item, the appointment of a clerk to take minutes. Are there any recommendations or is anybody volunteering for this? And in order to do so, you can unmute.
And Joe Reddish is just coming in now.
Hey, Joe.
Do we nominate Joe?
No, we don't. So as Gina and Lisa have said so in the very recent past, you will not have to take furious notes as each meeting is recorded. But we definitely do need a suggestion or a volunteer.
Gina, are you able to make each of the task force members co-host? I just heard from two people they're not able to unmute, and I don't think.
I'm doing it right.
Okay, perfect.
Excuse me. Go ahead, Carla. You should be able to unmute now.
Yep, thank you.
Did you have a suggestion or are you volunteering?
Oh no, I just noticed that I couldn't unmute myself. I'm not volunteering.
I'll volunteer to take notes.
There you go. Mr. Lopes.
Chair, would you like to meet me to review what notes need to be taken and which ones do not?
Absolutely, thank you.
Sure. So most importantly, you want to note when the meeting was called to order, when the meeting was adjourned, and then you'll want to make note of if a motion was made, who made it, who seconded it, and the vote. But you do not need to cover all of the discussion. Oftentimes you can just write, motion made by Maya Hill, seconded by Joe Lopes, discussion, that's the whole note, right? Vote, and then how the votes went. And as Maya said, you could always look back at the recording and fill that in, and then that gets sent over to Donna. Any questions, just ask me. If you need any help, just let me know.
Okay. How quickly the notes to be sent over to Donna?
We need them 3 to 4 days before the next meeting needs to post. So let's say safely, right? Like to give her maybe 7 full business days to get everything posted to the Secretary of State.
So do we need to have a motion for Joe, or how, or a vote?
No, you shouldn't need one.
All right, so for line item 3, appointment of clerk to take the minutes, we have Mr. Joseph Lopes. Thank you very much, sir. Excuse me, I apologize. Our next line item is to review and discussion of the school committee, excuse me, feedback. And am I correct to say that that will be you, Lisa, giving us the feedback? No? Or,
No, that's just an opportunity for the anti-racism task force to talk about kind of the totality of the school year, overall, what feedback has been given. I think at this point, all of the subcommittees have had an opportunity to present it, except for curriculum fully, right? The full curriculum presentation has not come forward, but certainly the subcommittees have spoken. So it's a chance, Chair, for the team to reflect and discuss what feedback you've been given so far.
thank you for that clarification. Does anybody want to start with that?
I'm happy to kick us off. So we, as a part of, I think it was in early March, the practices work group and the policy work group reported out to the school committee. During the practices work group, one of the tiered recommendations was to reevaluate the graduation dress code policy. So I know we talked a lot about that last meeting, but the feedback we heard from the school committee is don't wait. Let's make sure our students crossing the stage this year have a policy that can protect and reflect what, you know, that intent was. So we, at our last meeting on May 18th of the Anti-Racism Task Force, we looked at some of the draft language and in conversation, threw that back to the practices work group, who kind of made some revisions, sent that to the school committee, presented that at their last school committee meeting. There was some additional recommendations from legal counsel, and was it just last night? Yeah, last night the school committee had a special meeting to look at that policy. You know, the policy does look pretty different from the 1999 policy that district previously had. It is a lot shorter than the one that was recommended, you know, fully by this body for a variety of reasons. And there, I think, was a pretty robust conversation from community members about, you know, the need and of what the reason why we're going down that, but also some concerns from a legal standpoint. So from my viewpoint in the policy, you know, it does, in a kind of vague way, does capture the wearing of the cord, stoles, sashes, artifacts of significance, but does not necessarily cover some of the original pieces that we discussed as a group. So I don't know if anybody else has anything more specifically you'd like to share on that, or continued thoughts. One piece that did come up as some conversation from that meeting yesterday was that how the policy is written, there is still a lot of it falls outside of the policy and on practice of the district. So I know Superintendent Picard mentioned some kind of, you know, education or communication within for faculty and staff. So understanding the expectations there and kind of the intent of this policy. So that may be a helpful conversation for us as the Anti-Racism Task Force to have and discuss the things not covered in that policy that'll, you know, still fall in the realm of practices, you know, kind of where we go from there. Oop, and I'm letting in Heidi. Yeah, so I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything.
Dan, Dan, is Gina on the call? Gina, are you still here or did you need to step out?
Sorry, I'm balancing my mom duty tonight. Yes, I'm.
Okay. Do you need a moment or?
Nope, hold, give me 1 second.
Sure.
Making sure she's out of screen. Go ahead.
Okay. Chair, is it okay if I ask superintendent a question? I'll defer to Dan. Dan, yes?
Yep. Yeah, Maya had to step away for a moment.
Okay. So Gina, as part of the school committee feedback to the anti-racism task force last night, as Dan said, there was a discussion about the implementation of the policy and the ultimate wording of the policy versus the impact that policy will have on the students that it went before that body to protect. So this is an opportunity for us to really hear in more detail what the plan is for this graduation ceremony. And then if you have any information or any thoughts about how you see this being fairly and equitably implemented years forward, that would really help, I think, the Anti-Racism Task Force as they move down the agenda and think about their plans for the summer and which policies to look at again and practices to look at again. So because it was feedback last night, I do feel we can openly discuss this. So again, to recap, if you could just please tell us a little bit about how it'll be implemented and making sure that it has the equitable impact it was intended to this graduation, and then your thoughts about how to make sure administration, faculty, new faculty, old faculty who don't understand will equitably enforce this.
Sure. So actually, there's a lot of things when the task force asked about graduation, there's not much codified. It lives in everyone's mind, right? So the interesting thing about graduation is we're shifting everything we've done because in years past, well, many years ago, many of our teachers shared with me what their graduation looked like. Some had it in the bowl and had it outside. It's been a long time since Charaho did that. So we've been having weekly planning meetings for graduation to codify all practices because I have no realm for that. And we're going to be bringing 1,400 people to the main campus. So we, obviously we have, police detail for traffic, organization, RSVPs. We're still, even though, while we appreciate the outdoor masks coming down from the governor, one less thing, it's also, you're still trying to manage contact tracing because they haven't alleviated that from us. So we still have to, have assigned pods and make sure that we know who's there, et cetera, et cetera. But from the last night regarding the policy, a couple of things are going to happen. One being myself, legal counsel, and the high school administration team meeting to talk through, like, okay, now that we have the policy, what's the best way to think about the message so that when we onboard and think about our staff, the message is clear, expectations, that there's any follow-up questions should be directly to the admin prior to graduation, especially for any staff member who's working the graduation. As you all know, typically your high school principal admin, they're not with students at the moment that they process. They're actually in the procession. So it's going to be important that our deans, that our faculty that are working with our students directly are very clear about the expectation, which really is that we not touch any of our students. And that's typically what we tell them, regardless. That we, if there's any questions, that hopefully that they're clarified when we meet with them after the high school team meets with them, after we hear from our legal counsel, but that it's very clear that it's the beaded work, the feathers, all the stoles, the honor cords have been approved per policy and should not be touched, other than something being vulgar, using a swear word of some kind, like on something. We should not foresee any concern, but codifying that, right? So then, to Dan's point, when we were looking for information, having those letters in places, graduation letter 2021 practices, because as you know, many of our policies come along with procedure manuals or protocols that we follow. So that's our thinking, is that the policy now written, we will work with John to develop our protocols, and that where they're codified so that people see them, that they're transparent, that they live. Right now, what we do is we use like what we call a rolling agenda, and we're capturing all the kinds of things that everyone want to see: the 2021 invitation, the 2021 marching order, the list of who's all the town councilmen, all the things that everyone sort of knows about, but no one knows where anything lives. Even we had a conversation today about we have a member of who would have been a member of our senior class who was deceased freshman year, and we have a practice in place, but it wasn't codified. So I literally found it on a Post-it note, going through folders and looking, because everyone knew that there was something that existed, but could not put their hands on that document about how we handle those kinds of things. So a lot of work right now codifying the event as a whole, and moving forward to make sure the messages are transparent, like you would no different than you would see on our website for the parents, for the blogs, things like that, so that it's clear and that there's not. I know some of the concern was, we didn't know, we got the cap and gown and we did things after, but caps and gowns are being handed out Tuesday. So our goal is before Tuesday that we have that message drafted, so that when students pick up that gown and cap, they're very clear about those expectations.
Thank you so much. So what I heard you say is there'll be meetings with administrators for this graduation. And last night we talked about having an asterisk of some sort that called out and noted tribal regalia being the intention and the impact of the policy. And I'm actually hearing you say that plus more, an actual procedural manual that covers all practices and procedures for graduation ceremony. And I believe what you just said is you will ensure that the language that is far more specific and explicit will be in the procedural manual. And so could the anti-racism task force, is it reasonable to think come September or October, they'd be able to review that and have some, take a look at it and just maybe give some input for the 2022 graduation?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I also think
Wonderful.
there's other, just full disclosure, one of the things that we feel is needs to be revised, but we've been working on it since April and none of us want to rush it through, is the behavior codes, which inside the behavior code lives the dress code. Because it's a large like we've been looking at it since March, and we started looking at it in the summertime, but then with our COVID sort of things took precedent and we had to sort of prioritize which policies. But I actually was just speaking to the chair yesterday saying, I still feel like it's rushed, and I don't think that's anyone's intent. While we want, in our current dress code, while it doesn't call out gender already, there are things that need to be tightened with the language. And what we didn't want to do is take a piece of a policy and we fix a piece, but maybe saying, here's our intent, and make it a year-long process, because we really want input from our school improvement teams as well as our PTOs. And then of course the task force. And I think we're looking for multiple lenses to really ensure. And then a good example of this is Cala is probably going to come before the committee in July, I think, because there are things they need to do within their point system to ensure that they can move forward with their CSIP, but knowing that doesn't mean that we're not still tackling the same kinds of things, that we know it can get better, but we don't want to let perfection get in the way of making sure we move forward, especially in a school that needs to have targeted supports and is a comprehensive school in need of improvement. So that's probably one of the larger policies that really it's going to take us some time and to unpack it with our communities and our teachers and our parents.
That's really helpful. And I know the policy work group of this body had talked a little bit about some of the behavior code in some of the tier recommendations. So yeah, it'd be really wonderful to, as you're saying, to make sure it's a really important piece to make sure it's not rushed.
We did tackle the bus code, Dan. So that's going to be on the June committee, school committee meeting.
Okay.
And, while we worked very hard to look through the lens, hopefully that if
Mhm.
anyone notices anything, even at that meeting, calls it out, because what we want to believe is our policies, well, very, very important, are living documents that need to be revised and reviewed. And we have them on schedule. And that right now, one of our summer projects is really to look at which ones need to be prioritized every year
Yep.
and make sure that we're updating as needed. And my recommendation to the chair was that even the school committee think about a subcommittee of policy, so that there's a smaller group, so that we can have those conversations as well.
Sure. That's great. Thank you. And I do know Maya had to unfortunately step away, so I'll continue to move the meeting in her absence. Any other input or feedback from? We had obviously the most recent being the dress code policy that passed last night. Any other thoughts, concerns, feedback, or things for the district to consider as a kind of practices manual of sorts is put together? Any other thoughts before we move that on? Yep, and Donis.
I'm just really grateful for the meeting last night, to hear from the school committee and have them facilitate that discussion with a lot of input from the broader Narragansett community, which I thought was really helpful, even if it wasn't necessarily influential in the policy language immediately. I think that having some context and background for informed decision making for policy going forward was time well spent. And so I'm really grateful and happy to have been there to hear those perspectives from everyone, from the school committee, from legal counsel. It was very helpful for, I think, all parties involved. I know there were some members of the Narragansett Indian tribe who felt as though the language did not shift far enough in a certain direction. But there's also a lot of understanding, because this has sparked conversation within the community. There's also opportunities to explain why following these procedures and going through these processes again is building towards something. And we really feel like it was, like I said, time well spent. And I'm really thankful and grateful for everyone's input last night.
I couldn't agree more. And I think to have these conversations, loud and in front, in the open and with our community, and to get these thoughts out. And I think that is how we move this work forward. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, it excites me to hear about us, even though, maybe from a legal standpoint, less words is more protecting of our entire district, and wanting to be, really obviously we want to be legally sound when we're moving forward policies that impact our district, but making sure that intent, that impact isn't lost. So excited to see kind of where that goes. And, again, to the practices of, we have, the honor societies, we have, other groups that we, whether on paper or in practice, we endorse and welcome in, but how do we make sure that, the Narragansett tribe is not left out of that? So yeah, Thon, then Caleb.
Caleb had his hand up first, so I will defer.
There we go. Hey, Caleb. Oh, we can't hear you. It looks like you're unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay, it's an issue with my headphones. I'll be quick. Thank you, Thon, very much. Number one, I didn't know if there is a sense of timeline for following up on the anti-racism task force presenting to the school board some of the recommendations. And the other thing is I appreciated the conversation so much last night. And for me, in terms of the, there was discussion of neutrality, making space for everyone. And I love the idea of the shared ceremony. And for me, just from my social worker lens, all the discussion of, individual needs in the community is actually bringing us closer together. Because for a while, I think as a country, we thought that if we just if we didn't talk about the differences and the hard stuff, then that would bring more unity. Whereas we've found, again, social work perspective, that it's actually about talking about the differences and all the things that we share that makes us more unified and strong as a community. So that's just my little soapbox, but it made me, I know there's a little bit of concern that, talking about certain people and making way for them will make way for other people, but I think it just brings us all closer together when we have a real discussion. So that's my hooray for last night. I thought it was really great.
No, I totally agree, and I think the work of this committee, and I think it's kind of to the sentiment of diversity. If we just ignore diversity, or if diversity in and of itself is the only goal, it doesn't mean as much without inclusion, equity, justice, and really bringing that to the forefront. And again, through the very charge of why we're here, to look at policies, practices, and procedures through those lenses. But yeah, I couldn't agree. The first question, Caleb, was you mean the full report out, like all of our different, like our work and recommendations to the school committee, kind of an update on timeline for that? Is that? Oh, yeah. I know we'll hear next on the agenda. I think we'll hear from the curriculum group, who is the last who has not yet provided, has been able to provide a formal kind of update to the school committee. So that'll be hopefully coming soon. So we'll hear from that. And then I believe, we'll be talking a little bit in Lisa's report about kind of next steps and early accomplishments. So I think we'll probably get to that. But if we don't by the end of the meeting, I think that's important, because here we are kind of at the end of a school year. Got some great things done, but certainly more to come. Yeah, Thon.
Hey everyone. Just a couple things about last night. Well, I'm going to start off that it was really cool to have, shout out to Adonis's husband. I think when she first introduced, the most handsome Narragansett man there is or ever has been. I claim him as my cousin, but also he is our first councilman, tribal leadership. And so from, as being part of that community, that was awesome to see. All these bridges that are being crossed that weren't necessarily crossed before. And that is a testament to the work that we are doing here. And was it the exact verbiage that we had wanted? No, but I still count it as a win. And I actually think that putting in the religious artifact, which was in our original, and then they took it out, but then saw, how through the community speaking, they realized that this is a way to kind of have some sort of protection, not ideal, but some sort of protection. And I also just want to say, these are steps forward. And Gina, what you're doing with in the background that you didn't necessarily have to do, with putting together like the pamphlet or whatever, that gives more detailed context to what is happening. We are moving in the right direction, and I just want to give a shout out to all of you, because it has been a long year. I have been through the gambit, breaking ribs and being sick, and lots of things have happened, and we've all been kind of locked down. And in these moments, we've continued to push for progress. So shout out to all of you.
No, couldn't agree more. And also while it was through the lens of this, policy for one aspect of one day out of the lives of our students, it still makes such, and I think the testament from our community last night and the meeting before and our last anti-racism task force meeting about what that day truly means in a historical context and in the context of what it means to be a Charahoe graduate was something I don't ever remember a community talking about in a meaningful, impactful public space. So I think even just counting those wins, the amount of education and lots of different forms that happened, I think is really important for sure. So before we move on to hearing from the curricula group, any last thoughts on school committee feedback? I don't see anyone. All right. Oop, Lisa, go for it.
Yeah, I just want to give all of you the space because you won't have it later to discuss the other feedback, which was to create a glossary list. And I think that you all did a tremendous amount of work. I've had the opportunity to look and review the final glossary list that you submitted to the superintendent. So I just wanted to prompt all of you to stop and reflect and see if there was any conversation you wanted to have about that as a group. Because at the end of the meeting, that is going to be one of our next steps, is to get that in front of the school committee and get that up on the website. So to help you remember, I believe the school committee feedback was from Donna Chambers. She pointed us towards a particular website, the University of Georgetown Library. You all did the work. It's been through a couple of iterations. And I believe the other feedback from the school committee was to get it up on the website, on a website. There was a lot of conversation about have a website, have a place where this is put together and there's more information for the community. So I wanted to, Dan, just prompt all of you to take a moment and have a conversation about that if you'd like to.
I'm so glad that you did prompt that because so much work went into that for it to just be like, oh yeah, that.
Oh, I got notes.
I appreciate that. And I have this 4-page document up in front of me, then somehow that did not prompt it. So thank you. Yeah, so a lot of work went into that. The last few meetings of the anti-racism task force of really getting that to a point of where we're recommending it. And Gina, correct me if I'm wrong, that is on the next school committee meeting. So
Yep. So we have, if the committee is all set tonight with the curriculum update, and I've asked Linda to place both the subcommittee curriculum update and the definitions on the June 22nd meeting.
Wonderful. Yeah. So the I don't believe they've changed since that. I believe we had a special meeting of the anti-racism task force in May. Specifically to finalize and approve those recommendations to go to the school committee for the dress code policy, which has been heard and since passed after the last 2 school committee meetings. And then the other piece was this. So this was already approved by this body to move forward as a recommendation. As Lisa mentioned, coming even further back as in kind of an assumption from a school committee recommendation. So yeah, so any other thoughts or feedback or things on that, or things anybody wants to potentially alter or before this officially goes before the school committee? And I believe it is still the whole list. If any, it's obviously not publicly in a website yet because this is merely a recommendation to the school committee to adopt and then move forward. But I know it was posted for our last kind of special meeting of the anti-racism task force in its entirety on Secretary of State's site and on the Charahoe site. If anybody would like to read our 3.5-page definition list. All right, wonderful. All right, so agenda item 4, I believe we're on. Yep, so I will, 5, we'll hand it over to the curricula working group, which I believe is Heidi and Donis and Joe. So I don't know who would like to kick us off.
I can get us started, and I will share my screen. Before I do, Heidi and Joe, you can, I'll kind of take us up to the recommendations, and I can take us through tier 1, and we can move on. We're down a man. Jessica Abazinis is on her way to North Carolina, so we'll have to do some shuffling in terms of slides that are assigned, but I'll take tier 1, and then I think Joe and Heidi can go from there. This has been a really important learning process for us, learning what kinds of curriculum questions a parent would have, a community member would have, a teacher would have, a school committee member would have, an administrator would have. Sometimes these overlap, sometimes they are distinct. And so it's been really helpful for us to learn how to answer some questions around curriculum and really do our very best to clarify our recommendations in a way that is useful, I think is kind of the primary goal. So I will share my screen here, and I'll take us through, as I mentioned before, through tier 1. So we have a quote here from the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation, Wilma Mankiller, talking about focusing on future generations as a motivation for all of the work that we're doing, everyone on the school committee and everyone attending our meetings so faithfully. The charge is the same. The summary of our work is the same. So we'll just review these for the school committee because it's been a few meetings since they've had a subcommittee present to them. So we'll just refresh their memory to give an idea of how we have split ourselves into subcommittees, and we are the last to present. So I think part of the motivation of changing some of our language for our tiers of recommendation is focusing on using resources that either already exist or that are being implemented in the near future. So we wanted to use some justification for RIDE. And so we gave a little bit of background. This particular subcommittee issued a survey to K through 12 educators at Cheraho last year, earlier this year, sorry. And we recommended that from this data, the school committee craft a statement articulating Cheraho's commitment to an anti-racism curriculum. We recommend this statement live on the front page of the district website below the mission and vision in a pretty prominent space. And we recognize that that is a highly visible space. And so we are going to go ahead and ask for that at the forefront.
I'll work on tier 2 if you'd like. So we were just talking about this today. And that's when I had messaged Eugenia about the gap assessment tool. I didn't know what it was called. So we just highlighted it in bold. But we had talked about a tool that would look at our curriculum and review it using some sort of assessment tool that would look at it through the lens of anti-racism. And this is in bold because it's a work in progress. We're not quite ready for to figure out what language should go in there. And we're hoping that Gina, you might be able to give us some information. We originally were talking about creating some tool, and then we had a wonderful meeting with people. It went really well. In the district curriculum group, and they actually said there is a tool that exists. So we thought, wow, why reinvent the wheel? So we just want to put that in there in a way that is going to reflect the language that they are using, and we don't have that in there quite yet. I just got a new computer, so I couldn't muck with anything today. I was kind of going crazy even getting in here. So this is our tier 2 recommendation. It's surrounding this gap assessment tool. So we look at the curriculum and say, all right, in this area, we have some major gaps, and how can we address them? So this is our second recommendation.
Dan, do you mind if I just add something?
Sure, please.
Okay, Heidi had reached out to me earlier. I believe, Heidi, I responded. Bride is supposed to come out with, they have a tool that's being used for what we all heard, if you remember the presentation from Kate Schultz back probably, I can't even think now, maybe January that Kate came in, about sort of Ride's view from the new legislation and what their responsibility was, and what we were told, and I continue to be told, is that this month we should see from RIDE what they're calling the Racial Equity Toolkit. And that toolkit is an additional resource that will provide all districts in the state additional guidance, because as you know, many other districts are doing this work, so that it's very transparent about the kinds of things that we want to look for. Because while in ed reports, when we choose our curricular resource, and right now for the 2023, it's math and ELA is the first two we have to adopt, and then by 2025, science. So you'll see in their ed reports that there's many more resources aligned to math and ELA right now than you'll see in science. But with that, the district has adopted ELA K through 12 for our district, and it has been assessed already with RIDE's tools. And then now, so we also have the ability, and I think the difference comes with it in Heidi, you, and Donis and Joe, you were there. There's a curriculum, there's resources, and then there's implementation of all of that. So
Right.
there's multiple lenses to have to think through. And what we've been recognizing often is that what our teachers are asking for more support in is the implementation piece. So
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think the use of a toolkit as a lens for this particular tier would be something that the curriculum subcommittee would be interested in crafting some language for. And we feel, I mean, I don't want to speak for Joe and Heidi, but I think that might speak to using the tools that are being used across the state, and that are kind of in step or in uniform with other school districts as well. So we want to make sure that that our recommendation reflects that.
Yeah,
Right.
we were just
Right.
in this little difficult place because we're putting recommendations, but we don't have this toolkit. So it kind of got in our way a little bit.
Right, and that would speak to our tier 3 recommendations too. Like, once we were informed that this toolkit is coming from the state, it kind of made us reassess what we recommended for tier 3, which was, you know, the establishment of a resource center, and also taking a closer look at specific study of the history of South County. So we, as everyone said, we had a wonderful meeting with the curriculum team a couple of weeks ago, and they said that, or they recommended that we should probably wait for the state to make its toolkit public, and then maybe, like I said, reassess what we recommended in tier 3.
And I can go over tier 3. We recommend the creation of a resource center informed by the Anti-Racism Task Force, where teachers of all grade levels and subject matter have access to accurate and well-sourced curriculum-specific resources. And then, given Gina's feedback and the discussion with the curriculum planning council a few weeks ago, a shift towards implementation may be something that is worthwhile here as well. The next tier is we recommend using Charahoe's 5-year curriculum cycle to address the inclusivity of the South County specific place-based history. So what Joe was just talking about. And we recommend including a small team from the Anti-Racism Task Force to serve on the District Curriculum Planning Council. We recommend the district curriculum team use the Learning Equity and Accelerated Pathways Task Force tool to measure understanding, progress, and continuous improvement. Joe or Heidi, is there anything else you would like to add here?
No, I mean, we were just working on this afternoon, and I think this is still a work in progress. That's how I feel about it, because I feel like as we get more information, we can better update this. So that, I don't know, that's how I feel about it. I don't know about you guys, but that's
Right. Yeah, and I think the curriculum team from the district appreciate, they were, they complimented the subcommittee for the ideas and the work that we've developed. But they just cautioned us that maybe we need to step back a little bit and just consider, the new information that we will receive from the state. And I think they want to work with us too as we move forward with this work, the curriculum team, that is.
I think this sounds so exciting, and I think curriculum is, policies, practices, and curriculum are all so important to what it means to be a staff person, and most importantly, what it means to be a a student within our district. But I think curriculum is such a huge topic, and the ask of this task force was not to rewrite every piece of curriculum that goes through all of our schools. So I think these tiers, from this first look at it, like you said, it is a work in progress. All of our initial reports out to the school committee were that, they're all living, working, kind of recommend, giving them a trajectory of kind of where we plan to go. So I think this totally does that, and relies on data that we have, tools that we will have, and a direction to go, while also acknowledging how our district already operationalizes the way curriculum's updated. So I think this really excites me. But
and I think the deliberateness of working with the task force to have their input directly on the curriculum team because I think what we're looking for is how do you sustain it, right? So it can't, if it lives within the task force, then it can't be sustained by the district. So if the work of the task force, which I think it already says in our procedures that we want community members and parents as part of our curriculum team, and many of you met some of them at that meeting. I don't think you can have too many community members or parents that are thinking through, especially when we get ready to do our cycles. We know we have science coming up, and I know Susie Skinnick shared with the task force some of the work she's already done with the Tamaqua Museum as an example, but other ways that we think about it by grade level. How do we incorporate? And we're taking small bites of that apple, but I think the most important thing is to know that you all said it's not going to be done next year or 2 years from now, 3 years from now. It's a constant work in progress. So I think every step forward to make and improve upon our curriculum is a step in the right direction.
And the last two slides are the same. as previous presentations, and then we end with a quote from Silver Moon LaRose, and we say thanks for everyone's time, and we look to get some, I'm sure, immediate feedback from the school committee. And then I know that I don't want to speak for Joe and Heidi, but I mean, we're willing to kind of engage in whatever questions that might come up afterwards as well.
Just one clarification, Doris, where it says progress report in that slide, I think that was for all of you to give your update. And if you're going to do your update June 22nd, that probably is the next step that Mr. Grant was talking about earlier. Like the report would be like sort of maybe the full-fledged recommendation list from the task force, maybe the next piece. Am I reading that correctly?
I think when we originally made that the PowerPoint, we were planning for our updates to be in March, and obviously we spread that out quite a bit.
The curriculum by progress report. Or am I not reading that correctly?
No, I think you are, that last piece. So yeah, so I think the thought is, this, what the curriculum team is doing is in that first chunk right there. This is a, progress report. We've already heard from the other two groups.
Perfect.
And then we'll continue our work. And then ultimately our big goal is to provide formal recommendation. And obviously we saw the dress code policy as one formal recommendation. So it may not be in one large packet, but I do think that's, to what Caleb was getting to earlier. Great. And I believe in Lisa's report out, we'll talk a little bit about next steps of the task force and kind of where we go from here. But great. Thank you, curriculum committee. Is there any thoughts, feedback, excitement, praise about the great work that leading up to our initial recommendations? See some confetti, we see some clapping hands. I'll throw some confetti. We got some real claps. Wow, look at this. All right, so I'm not seeing, Lisa, go for it.
Yeah, Chair, I'll just offer some verbal praise as well. A couple of things that I think I'd like to see the school committee deliberate and adopt, and I'll make motions that evening if it's fitting. Absolutely having anti-racism task force members sitting on the district curriculum committee. That is essential. I absolutely support that recommendation. It sounds like the superintendent supports that recommendation, so there really should be no pushback around that. If we have to make a formal motion to do so, I will do so. That's fantastic. Also, that statement. We talk about this in Jedi work at the state level and at the college level, which is you really have to have a marketing and branding strategy that you're focusing on this, and it's the meaningful conversations and the hard work. We do that, but you're right. There needs to be visibility. There needs to be it needs to demonstrate to the community in all spaces that it is a priority in the district. So that statement, and if I recall, if I wrote down correctly, your recommendation is for the school committee to devise that statement. So really giving the school committee agency to around that, perhaps have a recommendation, one that that will be widely revised. But just some, if there's key terms or a key direction, you could always submit that with your minutes that evening. You could read it and then just submit it to Donna, just so we have a record of it. And then again, as your liaison, I will call for that to be on a future school committee meeting agenda, probably over the summer, to really have a thoughtful conversation around it. So I just think those are, we can do them. We can do them. And I'll be ready, if you're ready, to support those and try to move them forward at this meeting in one way or another, whether it's a motion or getting it formally on an upcoming agenda. So fantastic.
To that point, I think that's a really great point, Lisa. The in the policy committee, slightly different from the framing of being curriculum focused, but the policy work group of our task force, one of our initial recommendations was a diversity statement, and a anti-discrimination policy and things like that. So the policy work group has drafted, and it does certainly touch, this it hasn't gone past that group. So maybe perhaps, I know we can't have the curriculum and the policy working group together because then we'll be in quorum space. So we may have to brainstorm about what that looks like. But
You
that
can-
is not
You just have to post it. So like it would be just be a posted meeting. If it's
okay.
if it has the quorum. So and that happens a lot when the school committee does like subcommittee work, or especially during budget season. So it's just a matter of making sure we post the agenda so that you can meet.
Okay, so perhaps we can discuss that, but that may be it may be intentional to have them separate, so a really specific one on curriculum, or to have it, just about the, the commitment to anti-racism work and the diversity of our students and what that means as a whole. So
Yeah, I would be willing to have that conversation as to which approach would be most impactful and feasible. If having two separate statements that live in a specific space, or having one that combines the intentionality of both subcommittees. But I'm willing to have the conversation if the rest of the subcommittees are.
great. Yeah, Caleb?
Yeah, I would second what Indonis was saying. And in terms of being a bridge builder for the task force, I'm anticipating this. This is my my tough point of trying to be a bridge builder. The risk of being a bridge builder and combining statements to tell the intention and speak to the intention of the work sometimes waters down some of the language, or makes it less powerful. And I don't want that, and I don't want to but my concern is that the division that's in the larger community will still be there. And in terms of moving the work forward, I do think it's important to think about crafting the language in a way that is inclusive for all. So that's, I think it's a balancing act, and I don't want to, I almost hesitate to say it because I don't want to come off saying that we should placate and and mix things or make them too neutral. But I think in terms of getting larger support and really reaching out to everybody and bringing everybody to the table for these conversations, it might help just to keep that in mind, that the more you can reach out and speak to the intent for everybody, the more I think people will be able to hear that it is for everyone, and that we're helping the people that deserve the most help right now. But it's not that people who are not BIPOC or LGBTQ or whatever aren't valuable to our community. Do you know what I mean? Because I know that that's how the work is sometimes being heard by people in the public. And I don't need to placate that or whatever, but you know what I mean. That's what I mean. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. And I think that's, again, to the point of having these meetings in a public manner, in a place where we can hear from our community, in all sectors of our community, regardless of where we're entering in at this conversation, I think is so important, to your point.
Yeah, it's so tough.
Yeah.
It's so tough.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like Chief John. So, and like, for example, Dan and I'll just say this for the task force. Dan and I have been meeting some with Chief Elwood Johnson through the Chariho Youth Task Force. And it's great. And he's a stand-up guy. And he, I would have had no sense of this beforehand, but chatting with him, he said, well, you know, some of the language, I don't know, you know, it's kind of, you know, what are you guys talking about? And so I think those are the guys I'm thinking about in the community who they see our page for the first time, and to let them know that it's for them too, you know, and that they can get behind it and support it. So
For sure. Thank you. So would, for our next kind of plan of attack of discussing that, should we, the curriculum committee can have a conversation? And I know there's some overlap, and Donis is on both of those committees, so we can maybe discuss a little bit if see if that's a good fit of a direction to move in. But great. All right. Let me find this agenda. Here we go. Any before we move past the curriculum presentation, any other thoughts here? We don't need to make a vote or anything before they can bring this to the school committee? Okay. Wonderful. All right, so moving forward, I know in conversation of building this agenda after this was posted, Maya had made a recommendation that we table the practices and policy subcommittee update just from a time perspective. So that we can most certainly provide maybe a light update or move that to next time. I don't know if there's any thoughts there. I know we've actually probably covered a lot of the practices update just because a big part of that work was the dress code that we've had, you know, several meetings on and just discussed.
I'd move to table it till the next meeting.
Sure. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Carla. Had a motion by Joe and second by Carla. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Dartula is coming on camera. Looks like is that a yes, Dartula? We'll take that as a yes.
Tula with this, like the dramatic fade to black.
I know.
Like we're all anticipating her coming up.
All right. Any opposition? No. Okay. Great. Wonderful. So next, I'll hand it over to you, Lisa, for our school committee liaison report.
That chiming you're hearing is. We're just having video issues. We know.
Good.
Okay, so the items that I asked to have, great, Nicole, I'm so glad you popped back on. The items that I want to just discuss and kind of report out on are listed. We'll end up tabling one, but we'll talk about that when we get there. So an update on the Diversity Book Club. I've spoke in the past about the amazing work that's happening with the Diversity Book Club. And we had that conversation, that report prior to some really intense pushback that happened to our teachers and to our students that was certainly not well communicated or inclusive or meant to build bridges in any way. But I think there were actually calls to have it shut down. So if anyone's not aware, because we weren't able to get together in a group and discuss that, the Diversity Book Club has been directly targeted by multiple people in the community calling for it to disband. Not that different than the group calling for us to disband and for me to be unseated, et cetera, et cetera. So what I really want you to know is a few things. Mrs. Weeks and the teachers running that have persisted. They continue to offer what we call a third space, right? For our, not only our BIPOC students, but all of their peers to come to an after school group and have conversations that decenter whiteness, elevate lived experiences and stories of our BIPOC students, but do it through phenomenal choices of literature, right? And book talks, right? And in conversation around how the text connects to themselves and to their world and to other books they've read. I mean, we really couldn't ask for something more. And Mrs. Weeks does this after school of her own time. So One, I want to let you know that is wrapping up. I know that Mrs. Weeks has reached out to the task force to be guest speakers, presenters, to come in, to attend, to listen, to join, to read the books. If you have an opportunity to think about that for next year. I've had the honor of speaking to the group once. I may be speaking to them again, I think. And it's just going well. And I'll tell you that the students need the space. They want the space. They appreciate the space. And the way I have heard our students express their appreciation is not the way we do as grown-ups, right? They don't say, wow, that Mrs. Weeks, she's one of a kind, right? They talk about what they talked about. And I can hear the students in their circles talking about the conversations they had in Diversity Book Club. That to me is a measure of success because it means the dialogue is happening, right? They're awakening. They're finding people where they can have these conversations where they otherwise would have been isolated. They would have had to wait to come home to have those conversations and sometimes not even there. So I want to just applaud that work, applaud you, Mrs. Weeks, for sticking with that through a really difficult time. And thank you for not only continuing it, but Dan, if I can share my screen in terms of the update.
Please.
I asked Mrs. Weeks what I should include. And so we'll start with this. So this year they're wrapping up right now they're wrapping up their book talk on Hearts Unbroken. And Mrs. Weeks has been able to secure Cynthia Lytick-Smith Zooming in with our students for a book talk. Just what an outstanding opportunity. This is being provided to our students at no cost. They are welcome to attend, and my understanding is that the entire community is invited. I'll give a pause for this moment in case Mrs. Weeks, you wanted to add any details, but this flyer is available. I believe Mrs. Weeks has sent it out. If not, it'll be coming out soon. Please encourage the community to come. Caleb, AKA Bridge Builder Bob, send it out, right? If they're gonna call us out, come listen, come have a conversation. They are welcome. Everybody is welcome to have this conversation with us. So I'll just give a moment in case Mrs. Weeks wants to report on this particular author or flyer, and then we'll talk about the next event.
Well, thank you, Lisa. This truly has been an amazing experience, and the students really lead the conversation. It's quite remarkable. We were able to secure this author. We're very excited. The reason we're pushing out this flyer now and spreading the word is we want to give people time to read this novel before coming to the book talk with Cynthia. So if you can, spread the word. Andrea put it in our blog, just in the June blog, so it's there. You can look up Cynthia, she's best-selling author. She's pretty amazing. So that's the reason why we're putting this out now, and then we'll start to push it out again in the fall. And another thing that we're trying to do is team up with Silver Moon, and her and I have talked about starting a storytelling workshop to go with this. So have Cynthia's event happen, and then the next 4 weeks, once a week, meet with Silver Moon and kind of do like a storytelling workshop. She would kind of do the tradition of storytelling, have students write like a short story. I have my art degree, so I can do some bookmaking with the students, and then they can present their stories. So kind of really just bringing the community together. We would really like to have like whoever wants to join us. A few parents have reached out to me already, so this is exciting, and they're buying the book. One other thing is at the end of the school year, I think I have 7 copies that our club has read. I'm going to donate it to our library to put in the circulation. And that's what our plan is with the Diversity Book Club. When we get the books, the students read them, and then we're going to give them to the library to put them in circulation. So that's a way that students can get to the book.
That's great.
If anybody has any ideas, Silver Moon and I are open to ideas for making this kind of storytelling workshop, as fabulous as we can make it.
And I'll quick shout out, if anybody hasn't gotten or doesn't already own the book, there's a really great online Indigenous owned bookstore, Birch Bark Books, where you can order. And I just checked and they have them in stock.
Quickly, I wanted to add one of our talks in this book. There's all different kinds of topics that are being talked about. And one of them is how women are just called out in how they dress, and a very passionate conversation amongst the students happened for 2 weeks about the dress code. So before I found out any of this tonight, our students are like really have seen and read between the lines and see how it is sort of in some ways targeted towards girls, and how this language begins at a very young age in like elementary, middle school, of like what a girl should or should not wear. So I have students who want to be a part of that. If you need student voice for that. And actually Lisa's coming, asked Lisa to come to kind of talk about the students about like what that would look like, because they have some questions. So just wanted to share that.
Wonderful, thank you. And I see Thon, you have your hand up.
Yes,
There you go.
I just wanted to, when you're doing with Silver Moon, for her, tell her to reach out to me, or if you reach out to me, I would love to come. I am a traditional storyteller within our community, and I would love to share a story or two as well.
That's awesome. Oop, Nicole can't unmute. There we go.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I've been meaning to contact you because I would love to invite you. I've heard your amazing storytelling ability, skills, and we want to reach out to you. So I will reach out to you. And yeah.
Wonderful. I'm happy to introduce you both if that would be helpful.
Yes.
By email. Great.
Hey, Dan, one other suggestion would be, as you prepare to do this program, is to engage one of the news channels as a press release, as just a way for them to share out of the box thinking and educating about cultural experiences, and how you're bringing a book to life by bringing the author in. I think right now that's important to get those types of learnings out there for the community. I know I'm part of an awards program that I was one of the judges, and one of the other schools have done the same similar type thing. And this is really where the impact takes place. And then I always say, once it's out of the box, it's hard for the critics to put it back in the box when the goodness is already out there.
Oh, nicely said.
I love that. I love how Joe said when the goodness is already out there. And Dawn, all I was going to say is we're all fans. You know, Nicole was doing a little fangirl on there, but we are all fans of your storytelling. Dan, could you said if you wanted to purchase the book through an Indigenous owned bookstore, you could purchase it at, could you repeat that?
birchbarkbooks.com.
Am I getting this right so far?
birchbarkbooks.com. Yep.
Thanks. Nicole, I'll just put up in the notes for you in the share doc. Okay. So Chair, do you feel that has concluded? Would you like me to go on to the second item?
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. So also, this is how we do it so we can have these conversations. I'm not sure how many of you heard Joe Tasca's piece on the Rhode Island Public Radio, the NPR affiliate. Joe Tasca spent many hours interviewing members of the Charahoe community, the administration. They interviewed me. They interviewed Reverend Stahl and others, as well as quite a few students. And then of the students that were interviewed, they had compiled stories from other students, either from the diversity book club spaces or from their other lived experiences as well. So really there were multiple students that contributed to that story. Although one was heard, they all had a role in that. And so that is exactly what I think Joe is speaking to as well, and what the curriculum task subcommittee talked about too. It all connects, right? We talked about having the statement, having visibility, having the good news out there, getting into that good trouble. This was a really great opportunity. There is a tremendous amount of interest in what we're doing here in Charahoe, because anti-racist work in Providence, Cranston, Warwick has been happening and seems to be expected as the norm. That's where you do the work. You do the work where the brown people are. And right, this is novel in Rhode Island. Burrillville's not doing this, Exeter's not doing this, but they're interested. They're watching, they're looking for models. I've been contacted by Westerly, by North Kingstown, South Kingstown, Exeter. How are you doing it? How is it going? How do we bring it to our spaces? So when I put this item on, I want you to know that's what brought NPR to us. I did not dial up Joe Tasca and say, hey, do you want to come do an article about us? They found us. They came to us. They have been tracking what we're doing. So know that what you're doing, it's that pebble in the pond. The ripples are out there. Also, as a result of that, I was appointed to the Rhode Island State leadership team that is actually advising RIDE's Toolkit. And again, it's because the state is saying, wait, what? A rural district has an anti-racism task force? A rural district has a diversity book club? Whoa, didn't think about entering that space. And you're doing it. There's the scholarly, we need to have courageous conversations and we need to lean into the hard work. And then there's the doing. Everyone seems to be surprised about doing it. So kudos to all of you. And same thing, Dan, I just wanted to give space in case anyone had any questions about that. Hopefully not that many people were surprised by it. I was surprised when it aired because you never know when it's going to drop. But again, I can only contact a few of you to not start a rolling quorum. So this is how I had to tell you. So I'll pause again and just leave some space for discussion.
Thank you. Joe?
I was just going to say, did everybody get to hear it?
I did.
Because I think it was done very well. The way I found out that it was actually being played, I got a text at 7:30 in the morning from a colleague saying, oh, I heard you on the radio. What a great work that group's doing. And so that tells you a lot of different people with a lot of different, avenues and backgrounds and so on. Listen to NPR. And so in 5 minutes, as Lisa said, he was able to capture the spirit of everything this task force has been doing and create the positive space for it, even with, the negative that's been existing out there. But I think it was positioned very well and very balanced on how he did it. So.
Same, Joe. I received the text messages from colleagues across the, hey, Charahoe just got a shout out. I was interviewed as well, but happy that I was not a spotlight.
No, that's great. And I think to Lisa's point about, we're having these conversations and others are watching, our community's watching, our students are watching. And yeah, really, really incredible. Katie?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that listening to that and then the experience of the past week has also highlighted that, there's a lot of this story that is going to continue to unfurl, especially as we get closer towards graduation. So, with the work that we're continuing. So I am just leaning in myself to see how this work continues, I think to grow and morph and
yeah, and I think,
be part of this work.
Katie, to your point, what we heard last night was there's a lot of trust at the bridge. And to Caleb's point, but that doesn't happen overnight, and it's probably not going to happen within a couple of years. It's ongoing space. It has to continue, and it's we always say it to our students. It's not the words, and I actually said it in my speech at the National Honor Society. It's not our words that always lead, it's our actions and how we put forth those actions and our own character around those actions. So it's hard work, and I thought the article was a nice tribute to the ongoing work. And to Lisa's point, I think people expect it in specific areas of our state, and when it's happening in South County, it's a tribute to the community here.
Just to edify something Caleb said earlier, the one amongst all the other opportunities we have, the one thing I think we need to always keep in mind is we need to make sure it's a balance of everything that we do, so that as much as we are focused on our BIPOC and inclusiveness, we want to make sure that the model we set is a model that moves us all forward in the areas that we need to be moved forward. Some need to be moved forward in acceptance, some need to be moved forward and being able to be accepted. And then some just need to be strengthened in the areas they are. So I think that is the other opportunity we have as we continue to build the tools, that hopefully the toolbox we build in Charahoe will be able to be replicated as an example. Some of you know that I'm part of the conversation of the Nipmuc tribe up in the Pontiac School District with regards to a mascot, and the approach that out of the box, unfortunately, that school committee chair took was not a conversation. It was a shutdown. And so we should be happy that we are moving forward without being a shutdown, and we've been able to have the conversations to drive the change and acceptance across the board. So
no, couldn't agree more. I think to simply put, like, anti-racism work is not about taking chairs away from the table. It's bringing more. It's building a table that is accessible by all, that all feel valued at, but making sure that we don't put up walls and divide each other before we get to that point. Nicole?
Also, was thinking in this conversation, trying to break down the perception of, if I didn't experience it or see it, it didn't happen, which I've heard a couple of times at school committee meeting, especially last night when somebody talked about who cares about shoes. Shoes should not be a problem. Someone who works with students with physical needs. I've gotten that question from parents 3 graduations. And I had to say, don't worry about it. They can wear whatever they want. So whether it's higher because of sensory needs or shoes for stability. I look forward to having that shift of language with this work.
No, I think I'm so glad you brought that up. I think this work needs to be about hearing the lived experience of people around us, and like you said, even if we have not seen that with our eyes, validating the experiences of the people around us, amplifying those voices, and widening our worldview, because without that we won't move forward. So yeah, I think that's a perfect example of how important, even though maybe we didn't get verbatim a policy that came from this committee, but the work from this committee moved forward a policy that I think is more accessible and inclusive to our student body. But absolutely.
Okay, so Dana, I'm just going to center us back on the item so we don't go too far afield.
Oh, yep.
From the agenda. So yes to everything that everyone just said, and I too have since last night received multiple contacts from families of children with special needs that didn't understand the disregard for the importance of that. So, but back to the radio piece, that a similar comment, which is why this connects to that agenda item, a similar comment was published in that piece that somebody prominent in the community, Reverend Stahl, doesn't see it. And the interesting, the way it unfolded, if you haven't read or listened to it, I recommend listening to it if you're able over reading it. But the answer to that was not me. It was not Gina, right? It was not Joe. The answer to that was a student voice. And again, I think that's why it was such a balanced position, because it gave the airspace to the belief of the hegemony that what is norm everywhere. And then this elevated students' experience as well as what they've seen. So let's keep doing this. Let's keep being visible and being a model for this state. It's working. It's working. The next item on my report, I'm going to table based on the curriculum, not even table, I'm actually just going to eliminate it, bypass it. The curriculum subcommittee, all the work that you're doing and the tools that you're waiting on, the equity toolkit and the gap assessment tool speaks to this. I had some examples I wanted to share in case you wanted me to pursue those for you, but they are higher ed models, and you've just taught me that you're anticipating some K through 12 designs sooner than I realized it was coming out. I didn't realize you'd have it this summer, so we'll just eliminate that. And then the last part of my report is just, this is the last opportunity of the school year to talk about what we've accomplished in one school year. And I needed to be able to say all these things to you. So this is why this is on here. In case you haven't, really captured it, first of all, right, we came into existence. Unanimously approved, right? The first premier anti-racism task force in a rural Rhode Island district is this one, this sitting body right here. That was an outstanding accomplishment. Besides existing, actually formed, right? Appointed chair, vice chair, all the positions are set. The Roberts rules, right? That itself, you all came together in a new way and figured out how to move through this. That is an accomplishment. The anti-racism task force persisted, right? Just like we talked about our students earlier and the book club earlier, all of you did that, and that needs to be acknowledged through being called to disband, for me being called to be unseated, for being trolled, all those things. Everybody stayed, everybody leaned in, and everybody did so by, if you think about this, by inviting in the criminal justice team to come talk to us, inviting in Chief Johnson, inviting in Keith Hoffman, the Attorney General for Civil Rights. That's what you did. You heard everyone's concern, and even though it was perceived by many of us as threatening, you took a deep breath, you turned to one another, you turned to your resources, and you invited them to come talk to the team, come talk to us about it. It can't be quantified, but it is quality work. And you did that in your first year, So I just wanted to put that out into this space. As we know, right, you've advised on the dress code. We talked about that this evening. That is resulting not only in updated policy, but we heard tonight that Gina is going to be working on a procedural manual. That's great. It's a document. That's what we need. We need policies and procedures. We need a way by which a faculty member or teacher can be guided, but also can be, right, can be corrected, to be quite honest, right? If something doesn't go the way it's supposed to go in that procedure. So that's great news. The glossary, that was a ton of work, right? So all of that research, bringing that together, bringing those terms together with the intention of educating the community, right? The intention is not to, yes, there's some autodidactic learning happening there, right? But your intention is to bring shared language to the community to forward the work. I think that was a major accomplishment for this year as well. And I think I'll stop there and offer some space similarly to see if there's any other accomplishments that just want to be kind of spoken out loud that I didn't go over with that list.
I just want to also add that, the work with the Interact Club and our students, sort of the branches that are being continued and built upon. I know Dana Hall, Susie Scanapico are good examples of the work living and breathing every day in the community, outside of the walls of the school, but through the community. So I just wanted, Sarah Rubenstein, when she came to present, she also, I know the Rotary brought in. So I think, to Lisa's point, the word is out there, but it's living and breathing through our students and our teachers as well in the community, not just through the school.
Oh, for sure. Any other thoughts, input? Oh, Caleb?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to Sandra Lobb. And I know there's probably other people doing this work who I might miss, but she did a lot of work to work stamped into her curriculum and brought in a bunch of community members. I was involved in a small way, but Sergeant Pennington was connected to the class through Joe, and Corporal Dan Kelly, a local police officer, was there, and it was really heartening. It was great work. So congrats to her. I think she did great.
Thank you for that.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah.
I wanted to share a quote, and it's an anonymous quote, but I think it really applies to our group in a way. And it says, being positive does not mean ignoring the negative. Being positive means overcoming the negative. And I think that goes right to the core of everything that we've done so far in the short time. We've had the opportunity to be, collaborating together and collaborating with the community. And so I commend everybody, because it is a very challenging thing to work against the tide. But the energy we put in to work against the tide, actually gives us the highest sail that we'll ever get in achieving and making a difference. And as Lisa so eloquently said, one of my favorite phrases, being a pebble in the pond, we've been, 11 plus pebbles in the pond that have created a kind of a tidal wave of change, and opportunity that will affect a lot of people.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think just the space we've had on agendas to, it hasn't been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes on a school committee agenda. Each time we've been before that body, hours plus of leaning in to those conversations and rising that up for sure. Thon?
I just want to say thank you to Lisa for your work in helping and guiding us. Also, Gina, a shout out to superintendent who came in here, and I gotta say a major shout out to you, because as an incoming new superintendent, that cannot be easy to kind of buck the system and look at things from a perspective that the entire community doesn't embrace. That sometimes it's easier for people to bury their head in the sand and not look at those things. I think Joe kind of said, like, not look at problems and say everything's working fine for me, but not always striving to be better. And for you to come right in and say, no, we can do better as an entire community is commendable as well. And what I just want to say, this task force, this is not my comfort zone at all, but I have formed relationships through this that otherwise would not have happened. And So shout out to that as well, to all the allies, co-conspirators, and people doing the work. Every time I come here, I am in awe of you, and of because I know what you're putting into it, and I know it isn't easy, and it is truly. I'm always inspired to see it. I always feel like, oh man, they are all doing so wonderful, and you know, I feel like I'm holding on to you, but
Oh, what a cliffhanger.
We lost him.
Yeah, I think he fully exited the room. Well, hopefully we'll be back soon.
I think Don talks with his hands like I do, and he deleted himself right out of it.
Oh, geez. Well, over to you and Donis.
I also want to thank our educators, our classroom educators, and our parents in the community who really been a source that we could lean on and collaborate with. So just thank you for sustaining some of the conversations that start here and moving them outside of the Zoom space. So it's been such an important experience for us. And you know, this system was not created by Native people for Native people. And so for us to learn how to navigate the system and make these connections and see how we can work in this environment has been really wonderful. I want to thank all the school committee members who agree with us or don't agree with us for helping us sharpen our skills and communication and our fortitude to do this work. So many thanks to the school committee as well.
Thank you so much for adding that, because I think, and I know this has been said at this meeting before, at previous, but I'm glad we have room on the agenda to talk about this tonight, because every single person's here because we care so much about our community, our school district, the experience our staff and our students have within our building and in our community. We're not showing up here and at our task force, at the school committee meetings because we have nothing to do after 7 p.m. Then be on these Zooms. It's about showing up and having that love and compassion for our community and working to just make it that much better, that much more inclusive. So, and I wanted to echo Thon's sentiment to you, Superintendent Picard, for jumping in first year, not only and also in a global pandemic and navigating a large school district through times of constant change. But I know even on the back end, there's lots and lots of emails back and forth to not just showing up at these meetings and being present and helping us move this forward, but also, in all of that. So thank you, Lisa, for helping guide this work to creation and through our initial work. And thank you, Gina, for being here with us through that. So thank you.
Well, that was a wonderful space of affirmation for everybody. And so the next piece of this is next steps. Before I go on to that, and Donis, you're right, the parents, everybody needs to know the emails that I receive from parents and teachers. They are so thoughtful. They are sometimes paragraphs and paragraphs long. And I can tell, I'm an educator, that they thought them through, they read them, they reread them, they set paragraphs for me, right? They put time into it. Our teachers and our parents are with you, and they take the time, even though they're on screens all day with this pandemic, to write and say whatever the practice policy or issue is that's at the school committee or here, and not just thanking us for the work, being outraged by something or having thoughts or contributions that they want. They are really engaged. So just because they're not present here, and Donis, you're absolutely right, They are doing the work as well. And it's just as important because it's the parents standing right in line when we get back there, right? But waiting at the event, having the conversation with their neighbor, that is just as important as the public radio piece that we're doing. It's just as important. No conversation or change is too insignificant. So thank you, Adonis, for reminding me to share that with the parents. And Superintendent Picard, right? She's hired and she says, oh, I'm going to meet one-on-one with each school committee member to just get to know everybody. There's like 12 of us, right? She's going to meet, she tells us in our interview, she's going to meet with all of us one-on-one to really get our perspective on things and take a hold of it. And she does. She gets hired, everyone gets a meeting. I said to her, well, you know, you're going to do your first newsletter. You're going to introduce yourself. What's your stance on anti-racism? Because, you know, lead with it. This is you. We're going to see you for the first time. And, you know, she told me, oh, she understood diversity talks and all this work that she's done and she's prepared to do. I went, okay, check. Like 2 seconds later, 2 minutes later, this is happening, right? So when you are right, when you say like she started the first meeting she ever had with me, I brought this up. And I think she knew like, we're doing this, you ready? And she was ready and she has been. So Gina,
This is very subtle. So I had to get it out of her.
Yes.
Very subtle.
Like, show yourself, woman.
I do want to say, I mean, I think I said this to you, Lisa. I'm a learner too, and myself, Jane, we're working together with our South County superintendents. To Lisa's point, you know, we have a text thread with the superintendents, and we're talking it through, and we're learners in this space as well, and always feel like a typical educator, right? There's always more to learn and to improve upon, even in our own work, every single day. But thank you all for the nice words, and without this team. The team back at the district, I couldn't feel more blessed.
So for next steps, and I'm going to close my space for the evening, you'll have the opportunity to think about future agenda items. So this is my opportunity to kind of frame that out. You do have to think about, as a task force, whether or not you want to work over the summer, right? There's some pros and cons to that. Our faculty and staff, right? Some of them will not be working over the summer, so you could kind of follow that model, but our administrators do. And I believe our IT team does as well. We have members of IT that work through the summer. So you really want to think about how you want to use that summer space to move some of this work forward. One thought I'd ask you to consider is around the website, right? That's work that can be done over the summer that may not be too intense. It'll be intensive, but it won't require bringing in a lot of Chara House staff and faculty. That's something that you can probably do with the superintendent post the school committee meeting. They've already said they want a website. They've already told you the content they want on it. Those are things that Gina has oversight on, not the school committee. So really you can just work with her and Jane and IT to get the glossary terms up, get the statement up. So I would recommend that you maybe focus on a task, like a summer task. If you want to do more, great, but you also have to take care of yourselves and your children and your families and your mental wellness. But I'd ask you to consider that as a possible summer ask, but you do have to decide what you want to do in terms of next meetings. And then the last thing is to remember Gina's point and email me if you forget that you can meet anytime, right? You can determine first when you can meet. It is not breaking the OMA if you're all talking about dates and times. It's topics you can't discuss, but you all can be together on an email, or if you're talking and discussing Thursday at 10, no, Friday at 2, no, Saturday at 1, that's okay. And then once you know the time, you just let Gina and Donna know, or let me know, I'll get it to them. We'll scurry and post it for you, and then you can absolutely meet. You don't have to project it this far ahead. I think we need like 5 business days is just good, especially in the summer, to make sure we get it through. And that concludes my report for the year.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions before we move off of this agenda item? Oh, I see we have Thon back. Welcome. All right. So Thank you for your report, Lisa. Now we have public comment. So anything outside of, I know we've had some public comment to now, but any sort of kind of open space of anything off of our agenda that public wants to say or bring up? All right, not seeing any. So our next, to Lisa's point, time for us to discuss next meeting date. So I'll open up the floor. Any thoughts on meeting formally this summer? Frequency, any thoughts on there one way or another?
And then you don't have to set it tonight. Like to Lisa's point, you can
Yep.
think about it and say, to be determined, and then follow up maybe after the June 22nd school committee meeting based on feedback, or if that's easier. Because I know we call it like next week is our marathon of events for our seniors. So if I'm still standing on the week after.
Here, yeah.
But that makes it easy if you all, even a doodle poll,
Yeah.
Something quick if you want to put together and people can weigh in.
That's helpful. Great. Go for it, Katie.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna ask if, I know in our subgroups, we've had great progress and movement forward. So I know there might be some flexibility in terms of smaller groups meeting for work, as well as larger group meetings. But I defer to the group in terms of what you'd like to do over the summer. I'm available to continue the work and the momentum.
And great design. So I often lean on Katie for some, will not pretend that the web, I needed a new K registration, and Katie stepped right up for me to say, hey, so it would be very parent friendly and inviting. So I tap into Katie too as far as the web. If you don't, I definitely will.
Says bring it on. No, I do agree. I think, and to some of the point too that we discussed at the end of the curriculum update of some of our working groups that, actually pretty soon all three will have made an update to our school committee. So I think to take that feedback, and I know some of the policy and practices have been able to process some of that and move forward, but I think of really getting to a point that we could really bring things to this body and to get public input and move additional recommendations to the school committee may be a really great use of time. So to have some to have some subcommittee time to move things forward. But I do, to Katie's point of momentum, I think we have some momentum. Obviously, this is a hard time of year, and summer to continue, maybe frequency maybe look different. But I think to take some of this momentum, really build that into some of our subcommittee work, and then hopefully translate that into really kicking off the year with a kind of picking up where this momentum is and really moving that forward. So any passionate against that or for that by folks, and again, to Lisa and Gina's point, we can absolutely change that. We don't have to set a date now. If we do decide that we would like to meet and have more than just our 4 members of a work group together, that we can do that. All right, so I'm not seeing any passionate yes or no. So it sounds like that may be a, do we need to vote on that? Since we're not setting a meeting or anything, we don't need anything too formal. Okay, well, wonderful. So I think it's safe that we can challenge our working groups to continue this momentum and in whatever way that looks best for each work group. And then for us to connect, the members to connect digitally about setting a end of summer, beginning of school year first public meeting and getting that posted publicly. Great. And item 10, I believe, is possible future agenda items. So if we don't have a future meeting planned, should we quickly talk about, like, for our next public meeting, what would we like to see? Is there
And you,
thoughts there?
and same, Dan, you can hold on that, and then like you and Maya can work to discuss based on subcommittee work, what makes sense, based on feedback from school committee, et cetera. It doesn't have to be finalized tonight.
Okay, great. I think our next public meeting would be great to hear a report out from, and actually we tabled earlier the practices and policy subcommittee updates. I think that fits perfectly. So for our next public meeting, to have a more formal update, hearing from, so now what, from our practices and policy. And the school committee will have weighed in some on curriculum. So hearing some of that feedback may be helpful as well. Any other thoughts before we adjourn? All right. Well, I think that is all. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Carla. Joe made a motion. Carla seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No, it's 8:57.
8:57. Perfect. All right. Thanks, Tartula.
I forgot that I could unmute.
And all right. Anybody opposed? Anybody against? Ayes have it. Well, always a pleasure. Wonderful